You are waiting for someone to believe in you. That wait is killing you. Not slowly, not metaphorically. It is consuming the years you will never get back. You have built your entire strategy around a resource that was never coming. No mentor appeared, no parent stepped up, no community caught you. And so you adapted. You told yourself the absence was temporary, that it would arrive, that you just needed to prove yourself a little more first. Jung called this the great postponement of the self, the life you keep deferring until conditions improve. They won't. This is not pessimism. This is the diagnosis your psychology has needed. Carl Jung spent 40 years mapping the inner world of human beings who felt abandoned by the outer one. Patients who had no support, families that fractured them, societies that ignored them. And what he found was not what anyone expected. The people with the least external support had access to a psychological resource that the comfortable never develop. The absence was not the wound. The absence was the door. Your mind is not broken because no one championed you. It is being forged. Jung identified a specific psychological process that only activates under pressure. He called it individuation, and it is the most dangerous power your psyche possesses. Dangerous because it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't require anyone's blessing. It only requires that you stop waiting. The unsupported psyche has a specific structure. Jung mapped it precisely. On the surface, the persona, the face you assembled for a world that gave you nothing to work with. You learned what was required. You performed it. You survived. But survival is not the same as living, and your psyche knows the difference. Beneath the persona lives the shadow. Not your darkness, not your shame. That framing is wrong, and it has cost you. The shadow is the container for everything you were told to suppress. Your drive, your anger, your refusal to be small. When you had no support, you learned to silence those parts of yourself. Because expressing them had no safety net. You couldn't afford to fail loudly. You couldn't afford to want out loud. So those energies went underground, and they have been building pressure ever since. Jung said the shadow is not your enemy. It is your unspent fuel. Every person who dismissed you added to it. Every closed door charged it. The question was never whether you had power. The question was whether you would claim it. Here is what the unsupported life actually does to your psychology, and why it is not what you think. First, it forces internal authority. When no external authority validates you, you are compelled to develop your own. This is not arrogance. This is the spine that everyone else outsourced. Most people have their sense of worth on loan from others. You were forced to build your own from raw material. That is not a disadvantage. That is bedrock. Second, the unsupported life creates what Jung called a compensatory inner world. When the outer world offers nothing, the psyche turns inward and begins to build. An imagination of unusual depth, a capacity for solitude that others find terrifying. A relationship with your own mind that most people will never have because they were never forced into it. Third, and this one is the blade, the unsupported life destroys false identity faster. When no one applauds the performance has no reason to continue. The persona you built to win approval begins to feel hollow, and that hollow feeling is information. It is telling you who you are not, and that is one of the most valuable things your mind can know. Jung watched people with support systems cling to false selves for decades. Because the support system was also a cage, it rewarded the performance. You were never in that cage. You had nothing to lose by being real. Now we reach the mechanism. Individuation, the word Jung used for the process of becoming psychologically whole. Not happy, not successful by other people's metrics. Whole. Individuation is not a self-help concept. It is a life's work, and it begins the moment external scaffolding collapses. When someone loses a parent early, when a mentor abandons them, when a community rejects them. These are not simply tragedies. They are, Jung said, the circumstances most likely to initiate genuine psychological development. That statement should hit you somewhere uncomfortable because it means your loss was not a derailment. It was the setup. The individuation process has specific phases. The first is confronting the shadow, the parts you buried. For the unsupported person, the shadow tends to be enormous. Years of compressed energy, deferred ambition, swallowed anger. And beneath that anger, if you are honest enough to look, is not weakness. It is an enormous, largely untouched reservoir of will. This is not motivational language. This is structural. The will that was never used is still there. The second phase, integrating the anima or animus, the inner opposite that carries depth you have never accessed. Your capacity for vulnerability if you have hardened. Your capacity for action if you have collapsed inward. The unsupported person often built only half of themselves, the survival half. The other half, the part that loves, that plays, that creates without purpose, was never safe enough to build. That is not gone. It is waiting in exactly the place you stopped looking. The third phase is the encounter with the self, what Jung considered the central archetype, the organizing principle of the psyche. The self is not your ego. It is larger than what you think of as you. Jung said most people encounter the self only in crisis, when every external identity has been stripped. You have been in that crisis. You may still be in it. That means you are closer to your own self than most people who have never been tested. Now here is where Jung gets specific about people who win with no support, and the mechanism is counterintuitive. The absence of support removes one of the most insidious psychological traps, projection. Projection is when you assign to the external world, to mentors, parents, communities, the power that actually lives inside you. When support exists, the projection can persist indefinitely. You never have to retrieve the power. When there is no one to project onto, you are forced to reclaim it. That is not comfortable, but it is the beginning of genuine power. The people who disturbed Jung the most were not the unsupported. They were the over-supported, whose worth was entirely on loan, who had never been tested, who collapsed the first time life withdrew its applause. You have already survived that collapse multiple times. That survival is not a resume item. It is structural. It changed the architecture of your mind. Now we deal with the practical question, because Jung's framework without application is just beautiful suffering. Step 1. Stop misreading the signal. Every time you feel the ache of no one believing in you, that ache is not evidence of your worthlessness. It is evidence of your unlaunched capacity. The pain is a signal that power exists and has not yet been deployed. That is all it is. Step 2. Do the work the shadow is asking you to do. Ask yourself, what did I suppress to survive? What did I stop wanting because wanting felt too dangerous? Those answers are not poetic. They are the most concrete information about your actual direction that you possess. Step 3. Revoke the outsourced authority. Stop running your decisions through the committee that was never there for you. Stop imagining their approval as the finish line. The parent who didn't believe in you does not get a vote in what you build. The community that excluded you does not get to define your worth. Not now, not retroactively. Step 4. Build in the direction of integration, not compensation. Compensation means building more of what you are already strong in to avoid the parts that frighten you. Integration means turning toward the unbuilt half, the soft parts you buried, the wild parts you caged. This is not weakness. It is the completion of something that was interrupted. Step 5. Use the solitude as a laboratory, not a prison. The absence of support gives you something most people never get: uncontested time with your own mind. Most people never have an undistracted relationship with their own psyche. Noise and validation fill every gap. Your silence is an advantage disguised as pain. Use it deliberately. Jung himself spent years in what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, largely alone, largely without academic support. He produced the Red Book, one of the most extraordinary documents of inner psychological exploration in history, from that isolation, not despite the absence of support, because of the confrontation it forced. The people who win without support share one characteristic that has nothing to do with talent. They stopped requiring external conditions to be right before they began. They treated the absence as the condition to work from, not as the obstacle to work around. This is the crossing, from the dark mechanism to what you do with it today, right now, not eventually. You do not need a therapist to work with the shadow. You need honesty about what you suppressed. You do not need a community to individuate. You need the courage to trust your own interior signal over the noise that told you to be smaller. You do not need validation to begin. The absence of validation is the precise condition that makes genuine beginning possible. Jung's final word on the unsupported life was not consolation. It was a verdict. The psyche that develops without scaffolding is not the psyche that was denied something. It is the psyche that was forced to become its own foundation. That is not a consolation prize. That is the only kind of foundation that does not eventually collapse. If this opened something in you, stay with it. More is waiting. It always was.